Hey everyone, it's Brady with the Hot Take Sports Podcast. I'd like to take a moment out of this episode to thank the sponsor for today's episode, SeatGeek. Make sure to head on over to SeatGeek for all your ticketing needs, sporting events, concerts, and anything else you may need a ticket for. Make sure to use code HTS for $20 off your first purchase. I used it and it saved me a lot of money my most recent trip to the Browns and Patriots game. Feel free to check it on out and support the podcast.
This is Combat Talk, presented by Hot Take Sports. All right, welcome back to another episode of Combat Talk, presented by Hot Take Sports. I'm your host, Clayton Scalina, and for today's episode, we got a lot to talk about. It's been a while. I've been busy with school, so I apologize for the lack of content, but we are going to be covering it all. First things first, though, we're going to start off with UFC 280. I know that was a while ago, October 22nd, but there's a lot of stuff in there that needs to be covered, so let's get after it. For the most part, the prelims were kind of a dud, other than Belal Muhammad knocking out Sean Brady to give him his first career loss. That was a good fight. Belal Muhammad kind of dominated the whole time. The first fight on the main card wasn't really anything special. And then Beneil Dariush beating Gamrot. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I'm not sure, but whatever. Beneil Dariush is just kind of an underappreciated member of the MMA community. He's been good. He's 22-4 now, but he just hasn't caught on with the fans, really. He's just not popular. You know, he doesn't do a good job of marketing himself, I will say. In comparison to a guy like Izzy, you know, Izzy does an outstanding job of marketing himself, so he's super popular. Beneil Dariush doesn't really have that entertaining of a style. He's a big ground guy. He's going to shoot for a lot of takedowns. So he just, like I said, he just hasn't connected with the fans, but he's a great fighter. And I'd say he's probably one fight away, realistically, from challenging for the title. But yeah, congratulations to Beneil Dariush. But moving up to my favorite fight on this card was Petr Yan versus Sean O'Malley. O'Malley walked away with a split decision here. Very, very controversial in the MMA Twitter community. People were saying that Petr Yan scored 6 takedowns, which he did. You know, I'm not disputing that. I watched the fight. I was at B-Dubs. Me and Matt were there. Shout out, Matt. But Petr Yan shot for a bunch of takedowns. Call me crazy, but takedowns really don't mean anything if you don't do anything with them. You know what I mean? And people saying that this fight was a robbery in favor of Sean O'Malley is wrong. It is. They're wrong. Petr Yan, like I said, you can shoot for takedowns all you want, but at the end of the day, if you don't do anything with those takedowns, it doesn't matter. One thing Dana White has talked about a lot is damage. He wants to see damage. Damage is something that judges are looking for. Sean O'Malley was not that beat up. Like, you know what I mean? If you looked at Sean and looked at Petr without watching the fight, Sean won at the end of the day. He did get taken down 6 times, and he gave up over an entire round's worth of control time. But at the end of the day, that doesn't matter if you don't do anything with it. And I know people are going to be like, well, how's a wrestler supposed to neutralize a striker? Here's an idea. Take him down and do something with it. That's exactly what Petr Yan should have done. He took him down. He just never did anything with it. So I don't really think that was a robbery. I had O'Malley with the decision there. It was a close fight for sure. And I 100% get where people are coming from, but come on, y'all. If you watch the fight, it's not a robbery. It was a close fight. There's a difference. But moving into the first title fight of UFC 280, Aljamain Sterling defended his belt against TJ Dillashaw. Unbeknownst to all of us, TJ came in with a really nasty shoulder injury. And Matt and I were sitting there watching the fights like, what's going on? Why is TJ getting literally dominated? Like, flat out dominated. Aljamain Sterling made it look easy. But looking back now, it kind of makes sense. One thing that I've seen a lot was TJ Dillashaw being irresponsible by taking that fight. I'm going to go ahead and say yes. I really think he was. For this reason. There are other guys in the bantamweight division that could have done anything better than that. TJ Dillashaw coming in not at 100%, you know, obviously nagging shoulder injury. You're not doing any good for the division. I'm sure Aljamain Sterling was happy to get the easy win, but I think that TJ probably realistically should have stepped aside. But that's the crazy thing about this sport is you never know who's going to get the next title shot. TJ probably saw this. He's 36 years old now. Well, I only have, X amount of years left in my career. I might not get another title shot, which I 100% get. But like I said, at the end of the day, realistically, I think TJ probably should have stepped aside. But regardless, Aljamain Sterling kind of silenced all doubters. It'll be interesting to see who he gets next. People are calling for Sean O'Malley. I think that Aljamain Sterling kind of makes quick work of Sugar Sean, only because we saw his ground and pound work to perfection against TJ Dillashaw. And I think that with as much as Sean O'Malley got taken down against another good wrestler in Petr Yan, but I think that Aljamain Sterling would just take him down and ground and pound him at the end of the day. But it'll be interesting. Bantamweight's a very stacked division, and there's a lot of directions they could go. But moving into the main event, this one hurt. Charles Oliveira versus Islam Makhachev. Islam won via submission with an arm triangle in the second round. I gotta say, I'm very surprised. Charles Oliveira is one of the unsung heroes of the lightweight division over the last couple of years. He's put together a 10-fight unbeaten streak. But at the end of the day, Islam just made it look easy, and that's crazy. But when you have a guy like Khabib Nurmagomedov in your corner, you're gonna figure it out, and he did. That's exactly what he did. He executed his plan to perfection. He ended up scoring 2 takedowns against Charles Oliveira. Charles didn't even get a takedown. Controlled him for over a round in a 2-round fight. That's crazy. Was damaging him and then just locked in the arm triangle. At the end of the day, shout out Islam Makhachev. I picked against you. You did a great job. But now Alexander Volkanovski will be challenging Islam next February. I'm very excited for that fight. There's a lot that could happen. One of the things I could see potentially happening in that fight would be Alexander just knocking him out. Obviously, Alexander's a good wrestler. He hasn't had to show that off too much in the UFC, but he is a good wrestler. He's got a good base. But this man was over 300 pounds at one point playing professional rugby. Like, he's got power to him. He's built. Islam, though, with Khabib in his corner and the talent that he has, you never know. You truly never know. He could come out there and just dominate from start to finish with some wrestling, ground and pound his way to victory. So I'm very excited for that fight. I think early on, I'm just going to pick Volk. I'm still salty that Max Holloway got dominated by him last July. But overall, I don't know. I like the idea of a double champ. I think that'd be good for the UFC and good for MMA as a whole. So I'm very excited for that fight, and good luck to both guys. Moving ahead into UFC 281, this card was stacked. I love this card. We'll start with Dan Hooker. I was happy to see Dan Hooker get back into the win column via knockout. He'd been on a little bit of a losing streak, and he'd been fighting good competition, like Dustin Poirier was in there, Michael Chandler was in there, all that good stuff. But, watching him get back into the win column was a good feeling. So shout out to Dan Hooker. Moving on to the next main event fight was Frankie Edgar versus Chris Gutierrez. Frankie Edgar's final fight, The Answer, former UFC 155-pound champion. And he was knocked out in fairly devastating fashion with a knee in the first round. Just ate it right on the chin, out right away. That was kind of sad to see, a legend like Frankie Edgar, a guy who's worked super hard, just an all-around great champion, had a bunch of good fights with Gray Maynard early in their careers. But to watch him go down like that sucked, but that should not take away everything that he's done for MMA. So happy retirement, Frankie. I'm sure he'll stay involved with MMA in some capacity. So you haven't seen the last of Frankie Edgar, but you've seen the last of Frankie Edgar in the octagon. Moving on to, this one hurt too. Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler with an absolute banger of a fight. This thing was awesome to watch. So much fun. Action from start to finish. Dustin did end up winning via rear naked choke in the third round. Man, what a fun fight, though. Michael Chandler is the most fun fighter in the UFC right now. It's not even close. This guy's never in a boring fight anymore. He's fought twice this year. Both times were awesome. The first time he fought was against Tony Ferguson on May 7th. The HTS crew watched that together. Won via devastating front kick knockout. And then in this fight, he ended up losing, but I had him winning the first round. I had it 19-19 through 2. And Dustin Poirier ended up securing the rear naked choke. Dustin Poirier, you're still a terrible person. I don't care what anybody says. Seeing that video of you in the octagon being like, you know what you did. Shut up, dude. No, nobody likes you. Nobody in MMA likes you. Colby Covington's right about you. You're a piece of garbage. But realistically, he probably should get the next title shot after Volk's done. Yeah, I still don't like Dustin Poirier. I think that the fight for him is to just wait and see what happens at the top. Michael Chandler should probably just take a little time to rest up. The Conor McGregor fight's always out there. I think that'd be so much fun. Putting Michael Chandler in fun fights makes more sense to me than trying to keep him in title contention. So putting him against Conor, I think, would be a great matchup for Conor's return. But we'll dive into that a little later. But who even knows what's going on with Conor right now? So excited for Michael Chandler, Dustin Poirier. I hope you get your face pounded through the mat. The next first title fight of this card was Carla Esparza versus Zhang Weili. I think that's how you say her name. Regardless, she won via rear naked choke in the second round. Not too surprising there. And finally, the main event, Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira. Pereira? I don't know. Everyone's been saying it differently. Regardless, he knocked out Izzy in the fifth round for his third knockout victory over Israel Adesanya. That's crazy to me. He beat him twice in kickboxing. Did not knock him out the first time in kickboxing, I guess. That's his third victory over Izzy. The first fight was close, but like I said, Alex got the decision, and then he knocked him out cold in their second fight. Caught him. Yeah, just caught him. Happens. Left hook. His nickname is Hands of Stone for a reason. In just his 8th career MMA fight, he is the middleweight champion of the world. That's crazy. Obviously, very accomplished kickboxer. Like, it's not like he just started training in combat sports not that long ago. But regardless, good to see that the middleweight division title changed hands. Izzy cleaned out that division. Like, nobody could beat him. Robert Whittaker was close, but ended up getting finished. Marvin Vettori didn't really give him a fight. Yoel Romero was one of the most boring MMA fights I've ever watched. So it's good that this title changed hands. I think that there should be an immediate rematch, honestly. It should be in Brazil, so that way Alex Pereira gets to fight in front of his home crowd. But shout out to Izzy, man. He fought he's been in the UFC for 56 months now. He's fought an average of once every 4 months, even through a global pandemic. Like, that's impressive. That's very impressive. So shout out to Izzy for being a great champion. But like I said, I'm happy to see the title change hands. And our last MMA-based topic for now, at least when it comes to events, is this coming weekend is UFC Fight Night Thompson versus Holland in Orlando, Florida. Our boy Bryan Barberena makes his return to the octagon against former UFC lightweight champion Rafael dos Anjos. We'll get to that one here in a little bit, but that's the highlight of this card for sure. Bam Bam making his return to the octagon for the first time since his knockout victory over Robbie Lawler last summer. So very excited to see him back. There are 4 fights that really kind of stick out. There's a lot of good names on here, though. Darren the Damage Elkins has the funniest tattoo in MMA. Michael Johnson has the unique ability to be able to beat anybody and lose to anybody. So it's always interesting to see. But the first fight that I want to see is my guy Clay Guida versus Scott Holtzman. There are not a lot of Claytons in professional sports. So when I find one, I make sure to pay attention. And Clay Guida, is one of the Claytons in professional sports. He's actually in the UFC Hall of Fame for his fight with Diego Sanchez on the season finale of The Ultimate Fighter 7. Absolute slugfest. Please go give that a YouTube. You will not regret it. But he's a wrestler. He's a journeyman, 37-19-0. Scott Holtzman's 14-5. Realistically, I just want to see Clay Guida go in there and put on an entertaining fight. That's what he should be. He's 40 years old now. He's been in the UFC, I think, since 2006. So he's been around for a while. I just hope he goes in there and puts on an entertaining fight. Team Clay, all the way. The next fight I wanted to talk about was Tai Tuivasa versus Sergey Pavlovich. I think that's how you say that. I'm struggling with names today, y'all. I'm sorry. But Tai Tuivasa returns to the octagon for the first time since his knockout loss to Cyril Gane at UFC Paris. Tai Tuivasa is so much fun to watch, man. He's a brawler through and through. He always puts on entertaining fights. I'm 100% counting on this one being an absolute banger as well. So Team Tai for that one. And then before we get to Bryan versus Rafael dos Anjos, let's talk about the main event. So we got Stephen the Wonderboy Thompson, former UFC title challenger. He's challenged for the title twice, has not gotten it, versus the ultra-popular Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland's one of the most active fighters on the roster. He went 5-0 in 2020. He floats between middleweight and welterweight. His most recent fight was a submission loss to Khamzat Chimaev. Whatever happens, Khamzat's on a tear. But Kevin Holland is so much fun, man. Like, he talks trash during fights. He'll sit there and talk. I think that, especially with Stephen Thompson, Wonder Boy is a karate-based fighter. He's a very good striker. So I think that Kevin Holland will try and stand in exchange with him for a little bit. This is a 5-round fight, so he'll have time to figure it out. I think for the first handful of rounds, he'll probably try and exchange with him, and by round 3, he'll probably try and take him down. Stephen Thompson has not fought yet this year because he's wanted to fight a guy that matches up with him stylistically a little bit more. He's on a 2-fight losing streak, and that's because he's been fighting wrestlers. His style, like I said, is very striking-based. So I know he's taking on Kevin Holland. Honestly, I think I'm going to go with Kevin Holland here only because I think that by the 3rd, 4th round, he'll have figured out, man, I need to take this guy down to win. And I think he'll start doing that. So I'm going to go with Kevin Holland, unanimous decision. But the real main event, because nobody actually cares about that first one, is Bryan Barberena versus former lightweight champ Rafael dos Anjos. We talked to Bryan, actually, in an episode leading up to this fight. Make sure you go check that out. But to kind of summarize that episode, Bryan threw out a bunch of names, and Rafael dos Anjos was one of those names when he learned that he was moving back to welterweight. He'd been at lightweight for a little while, but just couldn't get a fight. So he moved up to welterweight, and now he's with Bryan. Bryan's currently on a 3-fight win streak with victories over Matt Brown and, I just said it a couple minutes ago, Robbie Lawler. Bryan has a very striking-based style, but he did say in his interview with us that he's been working on his grappling a lot more in preparation for RDA. RDA will shoot for takedowns. You know, RDA is very comfortable on the ground. There's no reason that he can't win on the ground. He's averages almost 2 takedowns a fight. It's a 3-round fight. So I think if Bryan's just going to have to neutralize his takedowns. All the guys actually submitted our predictions for this fight and this fight only. This is the only, like I said, this is the only one that really matters. Like, come on, y'all. It's Bryan Bam Bam Barberena, our boy. But Leo predicted 3rd-round knockout. Isaac predicted 1st-round knockout. Brady predicted unanimous decision. These are all for Bryan, by the way. And where are you at, Matt? I know you're in here somewhere. All right. I can't find Matt's, but he told me that he thought Bryan would win by unanimous decision, I believe. I'm actually going to go with Bryan via 2nd-round TKO. Like I said, I think that if he can stuff RDA's takedowns, obviously he's going to be a lot better on the feet. So I'm going to go with Bryan via 2nd-round TKO. Bryan, we're all rooting for you. We got a watch party set up at my parents' place, so we will be watching, and we are Team Bam Bam all the way. But that's pretty much all I have for events. The only other big thing going on in MMA right now is obviously Conor McGregor with USADA. And, actually, there's one more thing I forgot about, but we'll get to that. Conor McGregor is not currently in the USADA testing pool. For those of you who don't know, USADA is the drug testing platform that the UFC uses to make sure that people aren't doing steroids and stuff like that. But Conor McGregor is not in the pool, and if you see pictures of him on social media, he is looking absolutely jacked. You see pictures of him like out partying or whatever, and he, like I said, he just looks big right now. He looks really, really beefy. So I think that, is he doing stuff? Yeah, maybe. Like, he definitely could be, but yeah, he's not in the pool, so they can't prove anything. And since he's not in the pool, he has to be in it for 6 months before he can fight again. So we are a while away from seeing Conor McGregor in the octagon again. Like I said, I hope he returns and ends up fighting Michael Chandler just because that'd be fun. But we'll see. You know, there's always a lot of options with Conor. Conor's the biggest star in UFC history, so they're gonna try and get as much money out of him as they can. So I realistically think that we will probably see him again next summer at the earliest. But the other big thing going on in MMA is all of the stuff going around with betting. So a UFC fight between Derek Minner, and I'm not even going to try for this guy's name, but it attracted suspicious betting because, like, right before the card started, a bunch of money started moving to Derek Minner. And, like, it was right before the fight. And Minner won via TKO at 1 minute into the first round. Kind of raised some eyebrows a little bit. Derek Minner's coach, James Krause, former contestant of The Ultimate Fighter, has also been under a lot of fire. He hosts a sports betting podcast, so like that didn't make it look very good. UFC, the New Jersey State Gambling Commission, actually, they banned the state of New Jersey from putting money on fights involving James Krause in any way. So James Krause is in some hot water. Is it his fault? I don't know. I read an article on this, and like coaches were talking about like when they see guys warming up, and like for example, if they saw a guy like really like messing with his knee, like his knee might be loose, a coach would just whip out his phone, put $20 on the other guy, call her good. So that's been happening for a while. I think the big thing was just seeing the odds switch. Betting, obviously, and MMA go hand in hand. They have been since the sport's beginning. But I think that we will probably be seeing some form of switch. UFC passed a memo saying that they don't want coaches, fighters, managers, anything like that, betting on fights. So we'll see. There's a lot of stuff moving around right now. I think Dana will figure it out. Personally, I think that that's kind of stupid. Like, there's no reason that you shouldn't be allowed to put money on a fight. Like, for example, because Dustin Poirier is a piece of garbage, if I'm in the UFC, dominating and stuff like that, if I'm in the UFC, I'm going to put money against Dustin Poirier. Like, it's going to happen. Why? Why can't I do that? That's dumb. But I get the integrity concern, but at the same time, it's a sport, dude. Like, you know what I mean? And another great example is the Calvin Ridley suspension. That is the dumbest thing of all time. How are you going to suspend a guy for a year for putting $1,500 down on a game? Same thing with Pete Rose. He was betting on his team to win. Now, throwing fights, that's different. If you like bet money on yourself and take a dive, yeah, you should be banned from the sport forever. But if you're betting on yourself to win, like, why shouldn't you be allowed to do that? That's dumb. But that's the only other big thing I had in MMA. In regards to boxing, Tyson Fury's back this weekend. He's fighting a guy named Derek Chisora, I think. Just some journeyman just to keep warm for Alexander Usyk. That's on ESPN. I think it'll probably be similar to the Dillian White fight. He'll just toy with him for probably the first 2 rounds and then get that big right hand in the second and the third round. Tyson Fury's a very gifted heavyweight. He's huge. He's 280 pounds. He's 6'9". He moves exceptionally well, especially for how big he is. So I don't think Tyson Fury will have that big of a problem this weekend, if anything at all. But I'm expecting a devastating Tyson Fury knockout on ESPN Plus. So I actually get to watch that. So that makes me feel good. But I know in my last episode I said Spence Crawford was finalized. That was a lie. It's off again. They've both taken fights with other fighters. This is why boxing is dying, is because of crap like this. Why? Promoters, why? You guys are robbing us, the fans, of seeing the only fight that matters in boxing right now, I would argue. The only fight that really matters in boxing is Errol Spence Jr. versus Terrence Crawford. They're both undefeated. They're both in the top 3 pound for pound in the world. Why are they not fighting? Because the promoters are greedy and robbing us, the fans, of yet another fight. Ridiculous promoters. You should be ashamed of yourselves for robbing us of this fight. And this is why boxing is dying. This is why nobody watches boxing, is because of idiots like you. Anyway, moving on. Ryan Garcia versus Gervonta Davis. That's another big fight that has been signed. Both guys, I think, are going to take like an interim fight just to stay warm. Tank's already signed. Ryan doesn't have an opponent yet, but I'm sure he'll get one. But that's a big fight because a lot of younger fans recognize these guys. Gervonta Davis was hit. I don't even know what's going on with him and Floyd Mayweather, but they've kind of been hand in hand. He's been promoted. He's fun. He's a little guy with a lot of power. So obviously his fights are fun. He's 27-0 with 25 knockouts. Ryan Garcia, kind of the same boat, 23-0 with 19 knockouts. Yeah, 2 young stars in boxing, and somebody's zero is going to go. Who's it going to be? I'm rooting for Ryan just because I think like him trolling is funny. But I also know that he's like, I'm going to go ahead and say it. From the stuff I've seen, he's kind of irresponsible. Like, I saw a video of him the other day, like throwing a hook and his coach corrected him. And he was like, well, I can't do that because the cameras are on me. That doesn't look as good. Well, flash forward to like 2 weeks after that, bam, dropped. Luke Campbell got him. So we'll see, man. Ryan Garcia's got a significant height advantage, but Gervonta Davis's power, that's just hard to beat. I realistically think Gervonta Davis will probably win, but I'm 100% rooting for Ryan Garcia because the internet would be in flames. Speaking of the internet being in flames, Jake Paul's got like 55 opponents now. He's been calling out Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz is officially a free agent of the UFC as of 2 days ago, officially removed from their rankings. But he's also called out internet personality Andrew Tate. He's also a former kickboxing world champion. With that matchup, I really think Jake would have no problems with him, only because, like, I was curious, so I went and watched some of Tate's kickboxing fights. The guy's, like, heavy hitting stuff was all his legs. Like, his real damage was done with his legs. I just don't think in a true boxing fight he would have the edge. I realistically think Jake would probably have the edge. I think Jake would beat Andrew Tate. I don't know if he would knock him out, but I think that he would definitely win. That's all I have in regards to the regular part of our show, but we are going to move into Behind the Cage. And for this week's Behind the Cage, it's actually a question. Am I more of a boxing fan or an MMA fan? And I say without a doubt, you guys probably picked up on this from what I was saying a little bit ago, but I'm definitely more of an MMA fan for two main reasons. Number one, you see all of the fights that you actually want to see. Normally, usually. 99% of the time, like, the championship fights are stuff you want to see. You know, everyone wanted to see Alex Pereira versus Izzy. You know, that was a fight that everyone wanted. Same thing with the lightweight title fight. You know, everyone wanted to see if Islam could actually stack up against competition, and he could. You know, it was an entertaining fight from start to finish. It really was. So, and the other big thing that I like about MMA is there's no promoter problems most of the time. The reason that is, though, is because the UFC is a company. So they independent contract out all their fighters. You know, they exclusively fight people in the UFC almost. It's almost a guaranteed done deal. There's never really been much cross-promoting. There was in the early 2000s, like Chuck Liddell went over to Pride for a tournament one time, but that's literally it. So for the most part, like, fighters don't really have a choice in who they fight. They just go. And that's a big problem with boxing. You know, promoters get in the way of a lot of big fights. Like I said, the only fight that matters in boxing is Spence Crawford. And it's off again because the promoters couldn't come to an agreement. Ridiculous. I'm sick and tired of watching it. That's why I actually started off as more of a boxing fan, because boxing was back on TV during COVID before MMA was. They were hosting fights at casinos over in Las Vegas on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that's how I really got into boxing. It was the only thing on. But like I said, I just got tired of not seeing matchups that I wanted to see, so I became more of an MMA fan. I still watch boxing, of course, like I plan on watching Tyson Fury this weekend, but it's annoying, and I'm sick and tired of it. But this concludes another episode of Combat Talk, presented by Hot Take Sports. Thank you guys all for listening. Make sure to watch Bryan Barberena fight this weekend at UFC Orlando. Like I said, Brian, the Hot Take Sports crew is all rooting for you. Make sure to check us out on SeatGeek. Use code HTS at checkout to get $20 off of your first order. SeatGeek, you can buy tickets for literally anything that you want to. You know, Browns games, NFL football games, MLB games, MMA tickets, whatever you want. Concerts, anything. Make sure to use code HTS at checkout to get $20 off of your purchase. Again, that's code HTS at SeatGeek. Thank you guys for listening. And once again, this has been Combat Talk.